Let me play this clip because I know you've probably heard about it. If you've been anywhere near the internet or your local news station, you heard about what happened, the helicopter crash with the Iran President Raisi. Let me play this clip and we'll be right back.
Raisi's death comes nearly 15 hours after the helicopter crashed in a remote part of the country during dense fog. Rescue efforts have been hampered by bad weather and tough terrain. A number of other top officials, including the country's foreign minister, were also on board. The chopper was heading back to the country's capital when it reportedly went down. The crash comes at a fraught moment in the Middle East with the war raging in Gaza and weeks after Iran launched a drone and missile attack on Israel in response to a deadly strike on its diplomatic compounds in Damascus. Hardline. Previously, the Chief Justice, he has overseen a period of intensified repression of dissent in a nation convulsed by youth-led protests against clerical rule. Again, if you are just now joining us, Iranian state media is reporting there are no signs of life seen at the crash site of a helicopter that was carrying President Ibrahim Raisi and others. News comes nearly 15 hours after that chopper was first to be reported crashed. And of course, stay with Fox News Channel as we learn more about this.
All right, so there's so much attached to this that we need to unpack a little bit. Let me introduce you to Ambassador David Friedman. He's been recognized by the Jerusalem Post on many occasions, including this past year, as one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world. He was also named one of the 20 most impactful persons of the past decade by the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. So please welcome, and we're honored to have, welcome back to Flashpoint, Ambassador Friedman. When we see this, break this down. What does this mean to the American public? The Western mindset doesn't always understand when something like this happens, what's going to be the recoil effect? What are we going to see happen there in Iran now?
Well, Gene, thanks. Good to be with you. And look, I mean, the most important takeaway is that one of the truly most evil people in the world is dead. I mean, there is no reason to shed a tear over Ibrahim Raisi. He is responsible for the execution of tens of thousands of innocent Iranians whose only crime was to express their opinions, dress as they chose. And he runs, as the president of Iran, he runs the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. So we don't need to grieve for him. What it means is that there'll be another president, and the way Iran is structured politically, there's a vice president in about 50 days, and the guy who runs it, the guy at the top, is not the president. It's the religious leader. It's the Ayatollah Khamenei, who's about as bad as Raisi. So he's going to make sure that Iran stays on track. It does also, though, I think it's yet another episode that, as malign as Iran is, the sanctions over the years have had some effect. I mean, they got lousy equipment. I mean, helicopters do crash from time to time, especially in rugged terrain and bad weather, but not the ones that are carrying VIPs. I mean, you ought to have a good helicopter with good technology. I mean, I've been in lots of them over the years. I hate going in them, but when I go with somebody, who's a world leader, they don't crash. I mean, they get where they're supposed to get to, and that's a real failure on the part of Iran. Just like they failed, when they attacked Israel, they shot over 320 projectiles in the direction of Israel, and not a single one of them really did any damage. So on the one hand, we see Iran being extremely malign. On the other hand, we see them, thank God, not being quite as capable an adversary as we had feared.
So let me understand. All right. So President Ibrahim is now, he's gone. So now you still, like you said, I'm glad you mentioned that. The Ayatollah is the religious, really the guy in charge. He leads everything. Yeah. And we got the vice president. Now, what happens next? Who's going to fill that spot? Because I understand Khomeini's, is it his son that's actually in line, that he could have been the next guy?
Look, his son is, last night when news came of his death, there were fireworks going off in parts of Iran. I mean, he's deeply unpopular. This is a deeply unpopular regime. I mean, it's a very repressive regime, and you take your life in your hands. When an election, there'll be some movement to bring in somebody who's not quite as malign. America under Biden and under Obama before him never really encouraged the Iranian people to really take a stand against their leaders. We did a lot. We imposed much more severe sanctions. We encouraged Iranians to get out and be politically active. The Biden-Obama view of the world is to appease Iran. The United States will not get involved. They will not support any of the rebels. The bad guys will win again, and it'll be back to business as usual. I don't know if you saw, but the United States put out a statement today expressing sympathy with it was a condolence note for the loss of this. It's really not that far from a condolence note, for Adolf Hitler or somebody of that level. This is a very, very bad man. And who every day gets up and threatens to destroy Israel, threatens to destroy the United States. Our government now is in that mode where they just they're willing to basically offer condolences to this horrible person, which was I thought very disappointing.
Yeah, I like the fact the way you put that. Let me bring in Mark Meckler here. Mark. Ambassador Friedman's correct. This is like saying, hey, sorry to hear Adolf Hitler passed away. What does that say for this regime that's currently holding the president's office?
I mean, what it shows is the absolute hideous moral vacuousness of this administration. The idea that we can't simply call a butcherous barber what he is. I mean, he really was a truly evil man. The ambassador is correct, historically correct. Thousands and thousands of people died because of the decisions he made. He intentionally had them killed. We know that. The world knows that. And yet the Biden administration can't seem to say that clearly.
All right. So, Pastor Hank, let me bring you into this conversation. We've talked about this, and I want to go ahead and talk about this prophetic word that came May 26th. Iran being subdued and reset by the great I am. Can you kind of encapsulate that? We've got the graphic, but if you could encapsulate that for us, what was said that day?
On May 26th of 2019, I'm just trying to look. I've got the process here. One of the things that the Lord was talking about, that a regime change would begin to happen in 2019. He said it was coming. I have one also, Pastor Gene, that I'll reference from 2019, where God said, okay, you have it right there, Tehran. So in other words, God's doing a play on words. He's saying, you call it Tehran, but I'm going to tear at Iran. And the prophecy states that God is literally going to tear their leadership from them, and that there would be a regime change, a change from the old to a new regime. So you got to fast forward to September 15th, 2023, Pastor Gene. This was when Flashpoint was at Opening the Heavens, that we host that conference here in Omaha, Iowa. And you're going to be back this year, by the way. Flashpoint is. But God said then that the head of Iran would be cut off. And that's, again, God's referencing the headship. But the current one is the one I think really needs to get the people's attention. This was April 7th of 2024. And the Lord says, do not be moved by Iran. This is the latter part of that prophecy. Do not be moved by Iran, for they will raise their head, but they will be cut down. And of course, we know they raised their head. They struck at Israel. And the headship of their land shall be cut off. So God was already telling us that this was coming. And we had a guest speaker here very quickly yesterday, Pastor Bob Rogers, who has quite an outreach to Israel. And he mentioned something that God references himself as the apple of Israel's eye. And what he talked about, the apple of the eye, is if you poke somebody in their eye, there's a response. And that's what it means, that God is Israel's the apple of God's eye. You touch Israel, God's going to respond. And I really believe at the beginning of the year, the Lord said 2024 would be about his justice. And I believe we saw it on that very evil man and what took place there with that helicopter crash. Of course, they're going to want to blame Israel.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's, Ambassador Friedman, let's remind the public, we got some B-roll here of the Iron Dome during all of the attacks. So let's go back to October 7 coming forward now, where we've had so many attacks of what happened, that horrific display of absolute brutality, and worse than Hitler, to use, since we've already talked about him. In light of that, how does this loss of Ibrahim Raisi, does that affect what's going on with this attack? This Iran-funded, they're funding Hamas. We know that for sure. We know that's what's happening in Israel. Are we going to see any shift in that, or is it just insert the next guy and keep going?
Yeah, I think it's insert the next guy. I think it's going to keep going. I think that, I worry more right now about America than about Iran. I mean, because Iran is not going to defeat Israel, but America, at the rate they're going, are handcuffing Israel and keeping them from finishing off this job, which would just be an absolutely catastrophic result at the end of this war. So the Iranians are manageable right now, and they're maligned. They'll lick their wounds. They'll come back. They obviously have huge influence over Hamas and Hezbollah. We'll see how that all plays out. But if I were Israel right now, I would just focus on my border, especially the southern border,
right,
and finish off this war. I mean, they're close to the end, and we're at that point in Rafah where either Israel's going to win or, God forbid, they're going to lose, and they can win it. Left to their own devices and abilities, they could win it unless America just continues to try to handcuff them, which they're trying to do every day.
So let me ask you this, Ambassador. When we look at all that's happened, and I love the fact that you brought up, you're more concerned about America right now. Before we head over to the tunnels that were discovered, explain to me what you see from your, because you haven't been on since all of this really happened, the latest round of all of this. America's lack of response. What does that say to the Middle East?
Well, first of all, I mean, to the big Middle East, it says that America can't really be trusted when its allies need it the most. I mean, that's a really bad message. I mean, when you're talking about the way that the Abraham Accords came to be when we made our deals with UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, it was because they trusted us and they knew that we would be a reliable ally. When they needed us the most, primarily worried about Iran, but there's so many other terrorist groups in the Middle East. And so it destroys the credibility of the United States writ large among all these countries. Now, in terms of Israel, look, they just need, they need weapons right now. They need these bombs. They were denied these 2,000-pound bombs that are necessary to destroy the tunnels that we've seen that are incredibly complicated. They need these precision guidance kits that take dumb bombs and make them smarter. It enables you actually to do all the things that Biden claims to want, which is to win the war and to defeat Hamas and minimize civilian casualties. But, they're holding it back because they've decided, and, neither Biden nor Blinken nor Sullivan nor even Lloyd Austin, who's a military guy, none of them are really competent to tell Israel how to fight this war. This is a unique war. This is absolutely unique. There's never been a battle, a ground war undertaken, with a terrorist organization that has created 350 miles worth of terror tunnels, in which is holding, at the beginning 250 and now somewhere between 120, 130 hostages, and we hope they're alive, but some may not be. No one's ever fought a war like this before, and no one's ever had a need, for the benefit of the world, for the benefit of all of us, to win a war than Israel.
Right.
I mean, if Hamas wins here, terrorism wins everywhere. And so Israel has to win this war. They have to get to Rafah. And by the way, for those, as I do, who care about civilian life, I assume everyone does,
sure,
the ratio of terrorists to civilians killed in this war is the lowest in the history of modern warfare. It's about 1-to-1, meaning that every time Israel, for every terrorist killed, there's unfortunately a civilian killed. You compare that to many wars in the recent past, including ones that America has fought. It's 4-to-1, 5-to-1. It's nothing like this. Right. The head of ground warfare at West Point has commended Israel as on one of the most ethical, precise, competent, ground warfare battles in history. So, Israel is doing the right thing. It's got to win this war for nothing other than politics.
All right.
They say that Biden has a two-state solution. It's called Michigan and Minnesota. Those are the two states that he cares about right now, and that's the problem now. And,
it is.
And Israel just has to get past it and do what's right, and not let Joe Biden micromanage its war.
Amen. All right. So listen, those of you watching, if you're watching us on Facebook, we're talking about Israel. We're talking about Hamas. We're talking about Iran. Should I go away? Make sure you go over and catch us on Rumble and see the rest of the program. Let me show you this. Mark Meckler, this is Dr. Eli David. Since we mentioned the tunnels, 50 tunnels from Gaza to Egypt have been found so far, some of them wide enough to drive a car through, all with full knowledge of Egypt, which is an interesting point, where its corrupt officer made millions facilitating Hamas's smuggling. Now we know why Egypt opposed Israeli operation in Rafah. Speak to that, Mark. We got some pictures. I mean, when I first saw this picture, it was staggering. I mean, I think of a tunnel kind of like a mine shaft, but when I see it, I'm like, it's right. You could drive a car through there, a truck. Definitely ATVs, four-wheeler. I mean, this was a massive project to accomplish. So who cares that there's a wall up top? You got this that goes in between. Speak to that. What do we just make of it? All right, let me. We'll come back. Mark, I guess something's wrong. Your microphone's muted. Let me give you the same.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, gotcha.
What you've got is that Egypt's a bad actor. They've always been a bad actor in this region, and we've known this for a long time. They're against the Muslim Brotherhood inside their own country. But in regard to Israel, they're bad actors. We know this also because they refused to let a single refugee come out of the Gaza Strip into Egypt. They are no friends of Israel. They're no friends of the United States.
Yeah, I just still can't get over this, Ambassador Friedman. This picture of this tunnel, I don't think Americans. I like this one that has the soldier in the shot because it shows you the perspective of how big these tunnels are. Do we have any idea how old these would be, or when they would have been made? Do you have any information on that?
I don't, but I think Mark made a very important point, which is, for the whole duration of this war, the Egyptians were saying, we're not going to take a single refugee. Right. Now we knew why, because these were people that were highly radicalized that were going to make trouble in Egypt, and that was disappointing because like if you go back to the civil war in Syria, the neighboring countries took 5.5 million refugees there. So here we're talking about take a few thousand off Israel's hands, but they wouldn't take one. So that's bad. But now we find out not only are they not allowing anything flowing into Egypt, but they're actually, for years, I assume those tunnels have been around for a while, they're actually allowing weapons to be smuggled from Egypt into Gaza. So there's actually a one-way street, and it's going the opposite direction. Right. And I think, look, this is a very frightening discovery about the relationship between these two. These countries have not been at war, since 1978. It's been helpful for Israel to have a quiet southern border. And Israel's helped Egypt tremendously. It's Israel that has been bombing ISIS in the Sinai because the Egyptians haven't been able to find them, and Israel helps them out a lot. But to find out that they've been betrayed through these extremely large tunnels that can undoubtedly carry truckloads of weapons into Gaza. I guess the good news is that they found them before it was too late, before something really deadly got through. But that doesn't give you much confidence at all in the quality of your partner in a peace treaty. And I think it really is going to cause a recalibration of the entire relationship.
I think so too. Let me show you this. Those of you at home, look at this map, number 8, guys. Now you see there's the border we're talking about. This is where I think sometimes it's hard for people who haven't been to the Middle East to understand what we're talking about. So that's the border where these tunnels go, which you can see. There's Rafah right there on the map, Egypt. When you see this, Mark, I mean, it really, I like what Ambassador Friedman said. This is a one-way tunnel going the wrong way when it comes to what they're doing. What does that mean? What should happen next from America's standpoint?
Well, I think America, first of all, needs to let Israel do what it's got to do. We should be backing the only free democracy in the region. What we should do is let them do the job. They must finish this war. They must win this war. And anybody who thinks this is about Israel versus Hamas or even Israel versus Iran, they don't understand geopolitics and they don't understand world history. We're actually witnessing the pinnacle of a clash of civilizations. These are two different worldviews that cannot exist peacefully side by side. Radical Islam must be defeated.
Sure. Pastor Ink, I'm listening to the content tonight and things that we've discussed several years ago even. I mean, when that prophetic word was about the dominoes would start to fall, and we were definitely seeing that. We had no idea the extent of what we were looking at or what could possibly be. But I look at these tunnels being discovered. I mean, that's massive. And when you think about it, not just them being discovered, but not being able to cover it up before it gets to the mainstream media. That's massive.
Well, but remember, Pastor Gene, and I wish I had the prophecy before me, but there are several prophecies. The Lord talked about tunnels way before this is being talked about, and he talked about even what they were doing with children underneath the tunnels in those places. So I think all of it is coming to light. God said that we're in the middle of a reset. We're also in the middle of great exposure. But I want to encourage everybody, realize something with Iran. There are Iranian Christians that are praying, and they are asking God for change, and the Lord is listening. And something we have to remember, yes, there's things that are playing out with war, things playing out politically, but you can never exclude the fact that God gets involved when we pray, and he is. And I believe that's why that helicopter went down. I remind you of another prophecy. God says, watch what happens when the veil begins to come off. Well, remember when they did that in Iran and in the Middle East, God said it would begin to signal that change was coming. And I just want to remind people, lastly, we talk about America being in danger for what they're doing with Israel. We need to take a position right now and say, you know what, God, what about President Trump, who established a president that was pro-Israel? So, God, what about those seeds? You have to honor them at this time. And we are asking you to bless Israel, God, but also us who have blessed Israel. Bless this country and do it in spite of the seed that we've sown and not the buffoonery and the hatred that's happening towards Israel right now. And I do believe that's why God is holding his hand back on certain things with our country. He is extending a certain degree of mercy, but we've got to pray this thing through.
Yeah, we sure do, and we will. We're going to keep on it. All right, before we go to break here, Ambassador, I want to ask you about, this issuing of an arrest warrant by the ICC to Bibi Netanyahu. Is that just theatrics, or why of all things is this happening right now?
Well, it's not theatrics, unfortunately, because it has some practical effect. The ICC is a kangaroo court, and unfortunately we're seeing far too many kangaroo courts across the world right now, including in our own backyard. But this one is one where neither the U.S. nor Israel is a member. But here's the problem, and it's really a tough problem. Most of Europe, most of South America, a lot of these countries are. So if the prime minister gets an arrest warrant issued against him, and he flies, let's say, to Belgium, and he gets off the plane, they throw him in jail. That's what happens. These arrest warrants go to Interpol, and if you're a member country and you get off there, so it basically cuts off about 2/3 of the world from where he can travel, and that's ridiculous. That's just absurd. He can't do his job, if he can't travel and meet people and go places. So it's a real issue. The United States has remedies here. They can sanction the court. They can sanction its members. They could do to all of these judges the same thing that they're trying to do to Bibi. They can make sure that they don't end up anywhere in the United States. Believe me, they want to come to America more than Bibi wants to go to Belgium. So, but the question really is, as most of these questions come down to, will our government act from a position of strength, or will we continue to appease and apologize to the bad guys? And that's been a recurring theme of the Biden administration, and we'll see. They rejected the ICC arrest warrant as a theoretical matter. The question is, what are they going to do about it?
All right, I think we ought to go ahead and play this statement. Jason, let's go ahead and play Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement about the International Criminal Court and their arrest warrant. Watch.
The outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, is a moral outrage of historic proportions. It will cast an everlasting mark of shame on the international court. Israel is waging a just war against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas massacred 1,200 Jews, raped Jewish women, burned Jewish babies, took hundreds hostage. Now, in the face of these horrors, Mr. Khan creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas. This is like creating a moral equivalence after September 11th between President Bush and Osama bin Laden, or during World War II between FDR and Hitler. What a travesty of justice, what a disgrace. The prosecutor's absurd charges against me and Israel's defense minister are merely an attempt to deny Israel the basic right of self-defense.
And it all comes down to that, the basic right of self-defense. There's more on that statement. You can listen to the whole statement online. We just cut it down for time.